So he did an interview recently with Jackson Katz. Katz came on Newsom's podcast. I guess you'd say it's more of a conversation. And it also showed that while, yes, he does understand how the game is played, he's got a little bit of a ways to go. And the Democrat Party as a whole has a little bit of a ways to go. Let me read the Wikipedia, the bastion of infinite knowledge, what it has to say about this Jackson Katz guy. Here, I'll pull it up real quick. Jackson Katz, K-A-T-Z, is an American educator, filmmaker, and author. He has created a gender violence prevention education program entitled Mentors in Violence Prevention, which is used by the U.S. military and various sporting organizations. He's a former high school football player from Massachusetts, the first man to minor in women's studies at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He holds a master's degree from Harvard and a PhD in cultural studies from UCLA. Commie! But this guy went on Newsom's podcast, and I'll play you a clip of it, and let me know if you know what's wrong in the comments. Drop one on YouTube and Rumble for me. And share the show around if you're having a good time with us.
Men's rights movement, which was organizing itself, and then when the internet came into the picture, they were organizing through connecting with each other through the digital universe, and it was called the Manosphere, and it was, again, a small sort of corner of the internet. It's become completely mainstream now.
Right.
So Donald Trump's election in 2016 was a big accelerant to the mainstreaming of the manosphere. And now a lot of young people, young boys in particular, but not exclusively, but certainly young boys and young men, get drawn into the manosphere. And by the way, not necessarily because they're, ideological. It's not because they have like a critique of feminism or something or anything or masculinity. It's more like the algorithms draw them in.
Yeah, they may be learning about on a YouTube version of a video game they like, and all of a sudden there's an ad
That's right.
That's, with a Bugatti or something, and they click onto that, and all of a sudden they're part of some university.
That's right.
And then all of a sudden, 2 months later, they're in a conspiracy theory.
That's right. That's right. And part exactly. And part of the conspiracy is that men are being taken advantage of, and that men are being disadvantaged, and that feminists are anti-male, and that you as a man need to stand up and speak up and fight back, because that's the whole red pill idea. Like somehow you're now consciously seeing that the world is lined up for women, and which is, by the way, again, talk about a topsy-turvy understanding of the way the world works, right? And by the way, a lot of these men, as you know, have never taken a course on, gender. They've never read a book about it. They've never attended seminars. They haven't watched, long YouTube videos, or even TED Talks, like my TED Talk or other people's TED Talks. They haven't had much exposure, but they have heard that, feminists hate men, and especially white men. Let me just say, this is one of the things that I think is really great about you doing this.
Oh boy. Whole lot to unpack there with that retard.
Your kids look like retards.
Oh my goodness, Jackson Katz. So just when we think Newsom's got it all figured out, he brings that asshole on. Now, that whole conversation was I found it to be an interesting episode, because they were trying to figure out, it was fun. They were having like a struggle session, the two of them, trying to work through live on air. How do we relate to young men more? Why have we lost young men in such violent waves to the Republican Party? And that interview made it clear, if Katz is really the expert, that they just don't get it. You got me red-handed, buddy. I've never attended a seminar on gender. You figured it out. And you know what? I'll tell you what right now, if the future of the Democrat Party is dependent on young men under the age of 30 attending seminars on gender, they will never win another election in this country again. It's over. You might as well pack it up and go home, because ain't nobody wants to do that. Now, here's my thing. The problem is, I don't have an issue with the concept of combating toxic masculinity. The problem is what qualifies as toxic masculinity and what qualifies as just a man being a man has become far too gray. The line has become way too blurred for my liking, right? So a guy wanting to go out and lift weights or do whatever, learn how to fight, that's all of a sudden become toxic masculinity. Those are just traditional male activities. We have higher testosterone rates. That's why we want to go out and do those things. But that's been labeled toxic. Now, I'll completely agree. Frat boys hooking up with girls that can barely, that are barely conscious at parties. Yeah, that's a problem. That's toxic. I wouldn't even consider that to be masculinity, though. That's the issue here. Some of the locker room cultures, I get it. But the problem is people like that asshole blur the lines far too much. They think you want to be they want you to become this sensitive, feminine pussy and abandon everything that makes you a man. They don't allow any type of middle ground between the two. You're either Andrew Tate or Dylan Mulvaney. That's the line, or Tim Walz. That's the line they want you to draw. Now, if you see what Newsom said there toward the end of that video, he mentions that young men are watching a video, a how-to on a video game they want to play, and then they get an ad for a Bugatti, and he's talking about Andrew Tate, and they go to some online university, his Hustlers University, and now they're involved in some conspiracy theory. Again, they show how out of touch they still are with young men and how much further they still have to come. I mean, that's what you're reducing men to. Look, there is something to be said about why young men are gravitating towards someone who I'm not a fan of, by the way, like Andrew Tate. But to reduce them and demean them by just saying, they basically go, "That's shiny thing, da, da," and all of a sudden they're involved in this nonsense. You're diminishing the issue. It comes off as very smug and condescending, and he doesn't even realize that. Never taken a course on gender. How many genders are there, Jackson? Do they teach that on the first day in the course on gender? I would certainly hope so. Joe Rogan was, of course, an issue in this interview. They made this bogus claim in this interview, by the way, that Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson mock women who speak out about rape. Listen, I don't listen to all of Rogan's content, and I'm not a big Jordan Peterson fan either. But I feel like if either of those guys mocked women who were raped, that would be front page fucking news on CNN. I've never seen anything even remotely close to mocking women who got raped from either of those two. And this guy's their masculinity expert. Hey, man, why don't you ask yourself why I just heard of you today? And Joe Rogan has hundreds of millions of listens to his show every month. Ask yourself why young men gravitate to somebody like Joe Rogan rather than you. It's because they see Joe's not toxic. That's the problem. Is guys like that label guys like Joe Rogan as toxic. I get when you want to label somebody like an Andrew Tate with that. That makes sense. What does Joe Rogan do that's toxic? He's in a monogamous relationship. He takes care of his kids. He's very inquisitive, has conversations with some of the greatest minds on earth. He's not afraid to be exposed to new ideas. What about Joe Rogan is toxic? It's that he lifts weights and shoots guns and says no words. That's it. So if you're asking men to compromise on the very things that make them men, the very activities and hobbies and natural tendencies that make them men, to come over to your side, the answer is going to be no every time. So you got this guy like Rogan who appeals to men because he is a man's man. He used to be a liberal. You guys drove him away. Your own toxicity in the Democrat Party on the left drove Rogan away from you. And with him went all of his listeners. Millions and millions of young men between the age of 18 and 40 went away with him because you guys drove him off. You guys are the toxic ones, not him. It's toxic bitch-madeness. That's what it is. That's the thing. He's their masculinity expert. If you watch that interview, you really should. You really should, because it'll put into perspective how out of touch the left is on the male issue. Like I said, Newsom's starting to figure out why they lost. The entire Democrat Party still cannot figure out the young male issue and why they struggle with them so much. That entire podcast, that guy does nothing but attack and blame men. It was like watching an hour and a half of that Gillette ad from a couple of years ago that lost them all that business. It's the reason I still won't buy a Gillette razor. They still don't get it. They're still disconnected. Tim Walz went on, I don't remember what show it was. Tim Walz went on and said that he was chosen because he spoke the guy code and they needed him to relate to him. If Tim Walz is the closest thing to a man's man you guys have, you're done. You're out. The guy gets up and frolics around like a fairy on stage. You're telling me if my choice is that guy or Joe Rogan, that's any choice whatsoever? Of course not. And that's what that showed. That they can sit here and they can hash out what's wrong. And it really was. It's an important video to watch because it showed that a lot of the left that's like this Jackson Katz guy has absolutely no absolutely no desire to address their problem with young men. They would rather just keep blaming them. And what's going to happen is they're going to blame them until they blame themselves into obscurity. I mean, as long as Tim Walz is still the Democrat Party's idea of what a man's man looks like, they're cooked. The worst part was, I genuinely believe 60% of the Democrat Party, Tim Walz is actually what they see as a man's man. That's their masculine, that's their divine masculine, Tim Walz. It wasn't just a pathetic attempt at pandering for about 2/3 of them. They genuinely believe that that's what the average Midwestern blue-collar working male is like, is Tim Walz, who was a DEI hire, by the way. People hear DEI, they think it's black people and women. Tim Walz was picked because he was a quote-unquote straight white guy. People forget that. So as long as Tim Walz is the Democrat Party's idea of what a man's man looks like, they will never win another presidential election in this country until they address that. Now, had they picked Tim Walz and just said, hey, we like him because he's governor, he did a good job as governor of Minnesota, this, and that, I don't think he would have had quite the negative effect. But the fact that, with the camo hats and all that stuff, the fact that they tried to play this guy off as this hyper-masculine, blue-collar, gun-toting football coach from the, a small town in Nebraska, people saw right through it. They're like, yeah, no, I don't know what that guy is, but he's definitely not that. If they just would have said, this is our governor of Minnesota, he's a flag bearer, he's a yes man, whatever, people would have went, yeah, he's kind of weird, and left it. But the fact that they tried to shove him down our throat as the definition of masculinity, it was offensive to a lot of guys. And they said, no, thank you. We're good on that one. We appreciate it, but no, thank you. And now he thinks he's going to be president. What a fucking joke. What a fucking joke Tim Walz is. Dude, just fade away into obscurity, okay? Just go away. We don't want you. No one wants you. Your own party is going to guarantee with the superdelegates that you have no chance in hell at being the nominee in 2028. Why are you going to go waste a bunch of people's time and money and resources? Go do something productive with your time. Tim Walz. I mean, he is. The tampon Tim thing stuck because he's a pussy. Do you think if they would have called Donald Trump tampon Trump, that would have stuck? No, it wouldn't have made any sense. Or vagina Vance. People would have been like, what are you talking about? But because Tim Walz comes off as such a pussy bleeding little bitch, Everyone just kept calling him Tampon Tim, and the nickname stuck. You never had a chance in hell at relating to young men. And it's like I said, that's the worst part. Is 2/3 of the people in the Democrat Party, they're so disconnected. And they had, maybe this says a lot about it, they have no real male role models or male figures in their lives, no strong male figures. Maybe this speaks to volumes to the mental illness and the retarded political beliefs, that they took a look at Tim Walz and they bought it hook, line, and sinker. And they just cannot process why people can't relate to Tim Walz. This chubby serial liar that goes up and frolics on the stage like a little fairy. What do you mean you like Joe Rogan with his weightlifting and hunting and tattoos more than Tim Walz? What are you talking about? It's a joke. It's a joke. They even brought up in this, this Jackson Katz brought up about how toxic porn is, which I agree with. He brought up how toxic porn is to young men. Porn is not making young men vote Republican, though. It's not. You guys are the ones that campaigned on it. Remember those creepy ads we played with sex noises going on in the background that you guys funded? You don't get it. Porn has nothing to do with why young men are voting Republican. I guarantee it. That's a scourge regardless of who you vote for or if you vote. That's a cross people have to bear no matter what. And I agree, it's degrading people's views on sex. It's hurting relationships. I understand that. You're not going to find any argument on that from me. However, the idea that somehow if a young man watches porn, that's going to make him more susceptible to right-wing content is laughable. Laughable. I'm talking 100% of these anti-porn content creators that go out and they speak against pornography abuse on the internet. 100% of them swing to the right. 100% of the politicians that campaigned thinking this would somehow relate to young men and make them more appealing to young men. 100% of the politicians that campaigned on protecting your right to goon were Democrats in this last election cycle. 100% of them. Which is insane because it's an addiction that destroys families the same way drugs do. I couldn't imagine like showing some guy shooting up heroin and being like, the Republicans want to take away your right to do this. Like, fucking retarded. But they'll blame anything and everything. And it really is. I don't even know if this is like a blame game that this Jackson Katz and the Dems are doing here, or if they truly just cannot. It's not computing because they're coastal elitists that just cannot put two and two together. They just keep missing the mark. They cannot figure it out. You can't understand something you've never truly experienced. You can't. I can study the history of basketball and look up all of the plays and whatnot all I want. I can go, I can watch seminars from all these brilliant coaches. All of it. But if I've never picked up a basketball and dribbled it before, I'm not going to be able to coach a game. I'm certainly not going to be able to play in a game. Until you've experienced the thing firsthand, you're never going to be able to truly understand it. That goes for anything in life. How do you teach a kid to drive? If your son turns 15, do you make him watch a bunch of YouTube videos about the history of, the automobile and the engine? Read a bunch of, you read your car's manual on how to take care on maintenance and repairs and whatnot and parts? You send him out to the O'Reilly Auto Parts and make him take notes on the different types of parts there? No. You put him behind the fucking wheel and you let him figure it out. They got to experience the car firsthand if they want to learn how to drive it. These people have never experienced what a genuine man's man from the Midwest is like, and they'll never be able to understand it. They surround themselves with champagne-sipping fellow coastal elitists, and they will never be able to comprehend what a blue-collar dude from the Midwest is like. Not someone who looks like he plays one on TV like Tim Walz, the CW, not even ABC, but a real human. And when they continue to pander in such pathetic ways like that, they'll continue to lose.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, be sure to click the link in the description to get the full episode on Rumble. If you prefer to listen along, you could actually get us on Spotify, Spreaker, and iHeartRadio. You can also go to www.outlawstreamers.com to learn more about not just my show, but tons of other great shows and all the exciting projects they have coming up. Follow my socials at Caleb Isn't Funny on Twitter and Instagram, at Caleb Salvatore Comedy on the Chinese spy app that is TikTok, and be sure to like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks, and we'll see you every Saturday for brand new episodes of That's Based. Peace.